Hello and welcome back to the semifinals of the World Championship in Through the Ages. This time we are taking another look at Group 1 of the semifinals, at the second four-player game. And if you remember the first four-player game that I covered on this channel, there Martin Pecheur was able to win. Plunderteig finished second, Palino third, and Eepogi fourth. It was quite a dramatic finish in that game, and let's see if the second four-player game can hold up to that. Also, if you might be wondering why I don't cover a game from Group 2, the reason for that is that PV4 is playing in that group and he started covering his games. And so if you are interested in games out of that group, then just check out his channel. You will find it linked in the description of this video. Also, I will be on holiday days soon for 1.5 weeks, but as the professional content creator that I am, I actually have already some videos in petto that I will release during that time. But if I might not respond to some of your comments or something, then don't be surprised, as I'm on holidays and might not look at my channel every day. Alright, but now without further ado, let's take a look at the second four-player game, and as in the games before, I have no clue what will happen in this game. Alright, and let's start it with taking a look at the leaders and wonders. And as you can see, we have Pier in H3, there is Fleming, Marlene Dietrich, and Chaplin, however no Hollywood and also no internet. We have Steve Jobs and Einstein as some science leaders, but no Sid Meier and Bill Gates. There is Mahatma Gandhi in the Manhattan Project for the military, also the Red Cross is there. We have the Suez Canal in H2, but no Cook. We have Ocean Liner Service and Maria Theresa. We have Bach and Anthony Gaudi and Shakespeare and potentially Darwin, so a lot of culture leaders and also two military action leaders with Robespierre and Catherine. Also the Railroad is a strong wonder, but no James Watt. We have Great Wall, Nimechi Castle, the two strength wonders, St. Peter's Basilica and Machu Picchu. And then no military action leader in H1, Nostradamus and Genghis Khan to help with the strength, also Barbarossa, Columbus, Isabella, maybe together with the Suez Canal, and Leonardo, but no Gutenberg, and also Saladin. Martin is playing in first position, and as you can see, he starts the game by taking the Colossus. Could have also taken the Engineering Genius, but there is a Suez Canal in the game. He's playing in first position, so let's see what he can pull off with that Colossus. That gives Palino a relatively strong pick as the second place. He takes the Engineering Genius, but interestingly not Alex to already have a leader and to maybe not be a civil action behind. Instead, he wants to not commit to a leader yet and takes a second yellow card, interestingly. Eepogi takes then the Stonehenge and also doesn't want to go for Alex, instead takes the Urban Growth. Probably they have all seen my tier list video and saw that I put him in D tier and just said, nah, let's don't take him. And also Plunderteig won't grab Alex. Just Sansu, interestingly, could have taken either Ashoka or Alex, plus a yellow card, especially Ashoka in last position. I think I might have taken him together with Urban Growth or Stockpile, so interesting that he is willing to miss out on the yellow card just to get Sansu in the last position. So also interesting to see how how that will work out at the end. Martin goes for the Hammurabi, is willing to pay an additional civil action for him. And maybe not the ideal combination in the Colossus, in the sense that you maybe can't really dominate the event deck and put potentially favorable events in there, but on the other hand, maybe the strength of the Colossus helps you a bit to defend with Hammurabi, so a little bit of synergy is maybe there. Palino builds the third mine, takes Ashoka, and it takes the pyramids. Thanks to the Engineering Genius, he can actually finish the pyramids at the next turn. Maybe that was also a reason why he was willing to take Rich Land and Engineering Genius, with knowing that pyramids is in the deck. He knew that if he gets that wonder, he will just be able to he's guaranteed able to finish it on turn 3. Eepogi goes for Boudica, elects her, builds a mine and increases his population. Plunderteig goes for Sansu, builds a mine, increases his population, takes the rich land, doesn't want to commit to Colosseum, but maybe has another chance to get it at the next turn. Interestingly, doesn't take the breakthrough for an additional civil action, but having a free population might also turn out to be valuable. And Martin Pecheur grabbing an iron for 3 here. I think that is something that we have also seen from him in the last game. Of course, with Hammurabi, grabbing something for 3 is not as expensive, but he also doesn't have any additional science production, so let's see if he maybe will end up being a little bit low in science, but He actually takes the cultural heritage together with it, and with that he's actually guaranteed to already go for one upgrade at the next turn and will be able to upgrade his iron mines very quickly. Palino offers a trade routes agreement, wants to use food as resources, but Eepogi rejects it. He will now elect Ashoka, takes the irrigation, takes Leonardo, doesn't have any alchemies or printing presses yet, but there's a good chance that he will be able to get one. Is willing to get now the full Ashoka bonus going at the cost of both not finishing the pyramids and having to build a warrior to get out of corruption, so maybe not ideal. On the other hand, he has now everything set for Ashoka and can now maybe just focus on upgrading his economy efficiently. Now it's Eepogi's turn. He will build a second lab, builds a step, and thanks to Palino and Sansu being stronger and Plunderteig, he now has to waste the Boudica's ability with not having a free pop for those 2 additional resources, but he takes the knights, and with that maybe will be able to invest the 2 additional resources efficiently soon. Plunderteig seeds and opens the development of agriculture. Let's see if he will commit to a wonder this turn. He will build the second lab, increases his population, takes the Colosseum and a breakthrough. I think a very solid turn, and the Colosseum certainly also synergizes with Sansu. Martin Pêcheur plays the cultural heritage, is able to go for an iron mine thanks to that, takes the rich land and the engineering genius, and actually, again an interesting move, is taking corruption. Could have increased his population, but it's only food corruption. Maybe he says the food is not that valuable, but getting now 2 upgrades to iron, then having the engineering genius for the Colossus is just too valuable. And yeah, if he increases his population, then of course he also basically loses 1 food production because of consumption. Now he loses 2, has of course no free pop, so a development of a religion or warfare could potentially punish him. Then Palino offers again the trade routes agreement, again with wanting to use food as resource, but again it gets rejected. He finishes the pyramids, not using the engineering genius, as maybe he then would have some corruption issues. He will increase his population and takes the printing press, doesn't want to gamble on getting an alchemy, and as we saw in H2 there are actually quite a lot of culture leaders, and maybe the printing press could be quite strong in this game. Eepogi develops the knights this turn, is able to use the additional resource from Boudica, and probably will grab the iron, I would guess. Yes, he grabs the iron, and with this additional science from the Stonehenge and potentially Boudica, he should easily be able to invest into that. Plunderteig seeds, he's the only player that has seeded so far, but also no surprise with having Sansu. The development of planning is revealed, the options for that are development of markets, trade routes and science. He will reveal the phalanx tactic, maybe in order to keep some other cards in hand, but actually might already replace Sansu this turn. Yes, goes for Nostradamus, also a leader that synergizes nicely with the third military action from the Colosseum, and then he will take the alchemy, increases his population, so maybe doesn't want to go for a very aggressive game. Interesting that he was willing to upgrade the phalanx tactic while not having a copy of knights yet. Martin Pêcheur goes for 2 iron upgrades, increases his population 2 times and grabs the bread and circuses. There is Pierre in the game, and so I think that should be a very decent pickup. Skips the swordsman for it. Palino is trying it the 3rd time and now it gets accepted. Martin Pêcheur is willing, and I guess he has a lot of resource production and the engineering genius in hand, so there might be some use case for him to trade some of those resources into additional food. Palino can now use the additional food for resources, and on one hand this is of course nice being able to do that, but on the other hand, if he goes for printing presses, having some additional pop could be really important, so I'm not sure how valuable that pact even is for him. On the other hand, he has the irrigation in hand, can maybe go for some upgrades soon, and with that has even more additional food production, so then maybe in addition to the ones that he already had with Ashoka, so then maybe it's fine being able to have this pact. He builds an additional printing press using the pact, takes the swordsman and increases his population to get out of corruption, is now 3 science production and starts a bit of culture production. It's Eepogi's turn, he seeds, opens the development of settlement, he will build some stages of the Stonehenge, that gives him enough science to go for the iron, goes for an upgrade, takes the alchemy and then builds a warrior to get out of corruption. Now it's Plunderteig's turn. He will seed with Nostradamus, opens the development of warfare. If he will be able to get into the phalanx tactic, that might be a very valuable warrior, but even if not, probably as well. He goes for 2 alchemy upgrades, starts a bit of economy, and then maybe after that can start working on the Colosseum, which yeah, he might need a bit of help from the developments in order to finish it already at the next turn. Martabesher takes a copy of Alchemy, just goes for 2 upgrades, increases his science production, has a solid economy built up, and can finish the Colossus soon to also maybe be prepared for the event deck. He copies the Phalanx tactic, is not using Hammurabi's ability this turn, interestingly. But maybe as a preparation to just go for Knights at the next turn. There is now a copy of Knights coming down the road. Let's see if one of the players will grab it for expensive. Palino starts by some food upgrades, actually builds a 3rd farm. Of course, if you are going for that much food production, this pack becomes a lot more valuable. So I think a nice idea of Palino to just lean heavily into those farms now. He then takes the breakthrough, interestingly, for 2 civil actions. Could have also taken a cultural heritage, but maybe had some struggles to use his last civil action effectively. Could have gone for another irrigation upgrade, but maybe also felt that could be a bit of overkill. Maybe he plans on getting some of those wonders at the next turn, for example, where he could use some resources. Thanks to the pact, could even take and finish Himeji if he would like to. Eepogi seeds and opens the development of politics, some additional draws for everyone. Eepogi takes the free warrior, has now quite a bunch of them, builds a step of the Stonehenge, goes for an upgrade, increases his population, can maybe then finish the Stonehenge at the next turn, has now a bit of economy going, can upgrade more soon, and also is the strength leader right now with being at 9 strength. Lets this copy of Knights stay on 3 civil actions for Plunderteig. Let's see if he is willing to take it. First of all, the development of religion is revealed, and Plunderteig will indeed take this copy of Knights. And actually develops it a bit awkward with not having finished the Colosseum yet, but maybe he will actually let it be discarded if he now is building a knight. Then I think it's not guaranteed at all that he will actually have enough resources to finish that wonder. So maybe he is potentially giving up on that wonder unless he maybe gets help from the event deck, or maybe he surprisingly has 2 more turns in H1. Martabesher finishes the Colossus. Let's see if he is maybe taking one of those wonders. I think with having that many resource production it could be fine, but maybe also taking Swordsman, Cultural Heritage and stuff could be fine as well. He develops the Bread and Circuses, maybe wants to get those civil actions out of the way, maybe has a Happy Face related events in there and actually just uses all of his civil actions in the civilization. Lets those wonders stay on 2 civil actions for Palino, maybe still has a shot at getting one of them at the next turn. Now it's Palino's turn. He reveals the Fighting Band tactic. He doesn't know if he gets the last copy of Knights yet. And as I said, with not going for this 3rd farm upgrade, he has now, thanks to the pact, enough resource to take and finish Himeji, which, with his low military action count, might actually save him from an aggression. So some nice foresight by him. And now being able to defend himself and also being on 4 culture production. I think also in the first one of the 4-player games, Palino went for a bit of a setup where he had a bit of an early culture lead. Maybe that is again his strategy. Eepogi seeds and the developed territory is revealed, which Plunderteig is able to win for just a knight, so that's relatively nice for him. Eepogi takes the free religion, finishes the Stonehenge, has now no unhappy workers, but might get one soon when the age will end, takes the urban growth and then ends his turn. Plunderteig doesn't see it, maybe doesn't have an event with Nostradamus, or is afraid of some bad events in there. Will rebuild a knight, is also willing to pick up this iron, develops the cartography. And yeah, again, it's not looking like he might finish the Colosseum. The age might end before his next turn. There's another colony revealed. Plunderteig maybe not being willing to bid for that because of being in fear of an aggression, or maybe he knows that there are some better colonies coming. So Martabesher is able to win that one for just a warrior, so that's still also a nice grab, even though he maybe doesn't need as many resources. Now Marta actually picks Saladin for 3 civil actions, which is a bit expensive, but if he doesn't take him now, maybe he could be grabbed away by Eepogi, and while it is expensive to grab Saladin for 3 now, if he gets him for 1 at the next turn, he doesn't get a civil action back from replacing his leader, so it's not that much more expensive, and he just guarantees that he is Saladin. Maybe with the Colossus he could hope for a bit of a gamble and wait for Columbus, and if he doesn't get Columbus, can then go for Saladin at the next turn, but maybe also he wants to be prepared to maybe grab an H2 wonder for expensive, and with that doesn't want to bother with having to take and elect a leader at the next turn. Now, with having taken Saladin for expensive, he will start into H2 with 5 civil actions. If he waits to replace his leader at the next turn, then he will lose Hammurabi and he will be at 4 civil actions, has to take and elect a leader, meaning he's not well prepared in order to maybe grab some strong H2 cards for expensive. let's see if that will pay off. He elects Saladin, increases his population, actually builds an additional farm, interestingly. Thanks to the pact, he will be able to increase his population at the next turn, even if the age ends. Now it's Palino's turn, and he will go for the Code of Laws, develops it, has now even more civil actions, goes for the Swordsman, goes relatively low in science. Might be a bit difficult for him now to get into an H2 government form, but if I remember correctly, there's actually Robespierre in the game. Also, he goes now for his last farm upgrade, can probably use his pact every turn. Now it's Eepogi's turn, he offers the Open Borders Agreement to Palino. He will take the second copy of Code of Laws, also drops relatively low in science. Maybe there are some signs of Dark Ages, but Plunderteig, who has full knowledge about this event deck, has actually a lot of science saved up, so that might be an indicator that there are no Dark Ages coming. Eepogi just completes his economy upgrades, and I mean, he actually has some strong science production now, so he might still soon have enough for an H2 government form. Plunderteig seeds and opens the foray, which will net him and Eepogi to some additional food or resources. He will end up taking 3 resources and 0 food, also gets some iron production started now, and takes the urban growth. Martin seeds and then reveals the scientific breakthrough. He has actually taken the strength from Saladin, so I maybe talked a bit too much about this 5th civil action, but of course he also maybe after winning this colony was a bit in danger of an aggression and just used Saladin maybe to be safe in order to not get hit by something. I didn't even notice it when his turn ended. A scientific breakthrough is revealed, so now there's a bit of additional science in the game, and he's actually willing to take the navigation for expensive. Knows that Plunderteig has cartography, maybe has even seeded now an H2 colony himself, I could imagine. And then he might prepare himself nicely for the Suez Canal, is even willing to take corruption in order to take this navigation, but with having that much resource production, maybe the corruption is not as bad, and also the strength from the navigation might actually be very viable for him, or valuable. Palino seeds and opens the call to arms. Martin just switched from strength to the civil action, now will lose the civil action by the call to arms, but he would have lost 1 anyway, even when he would have taken the strength, so doesn't really... I mean, now he's getting an additional draw, so his choice paid off, even with that event revealed, unless of course there are more events coming. Palino builds this arena, gets a bit stronger, upgrades the warrior, is now the strongest instead of the weakest. Oh, and there's actually also an early ocean liner. Palino not being able or willing to take it for expensive. He's on bronze mines. He had an uprising issue to fix at the beginning of the turn, but I guess that is a wonder that will certainly find its way into Eepogi's civilization. And he indeed will take it, takes the ocean liner, takes Columbus. He also still needs an H1 leader, Columbus, if he has a colony, or maybe gets now a bit of luck and draws an H2 one, could be a very strong transitional leader for him. Plunderteig gets the first copy of an H2 government form, goes for the constitutional monarchy, upgrades his last iron mine, and takes the St. Peter's Basilica as his first wonder now that he discarded the Colosseum earlier. Martin seeds and opens the new deposits. Palino is the only one being only in bronze mines. Martin now having a lot of resources saved up. He goes for the knights, increases his population, builds a knight, now being the strongest, and then ends his turn. Skips this copy of cannons. Palino, interestingly, takes the journalism. With Leonardo, of course, that gives him a bit of a science boost. Even builds an additional library going up to 6 science production, is willing to grab to miss out on the cannons and a bunch of yellow cards, but gets out of corruption, and maybe has a nice setup for H2, but maybe a bit greedy with being on bronze mines and building an additional one, missing out on those cards, but if he doesn't get punished, could work out very well, and he has the Himeji to make him a bit safer. And also still getting nice food income. Eepogi finished this very early ocean liner. Let's see if he just takes the cannons or is maybe willing to take yellow card or even elect Columbus. He takes the cannons, and I think if you have the chance to take them for 1 and you don't have something very, very important to do instead, then it's always good grabbing those. Plunderteig seeds and opens the cultural influence. Palino getting the most out of that. Plunderteig finishes the St. Peter's Basilica, takes the breakthrough, another breakthrough, and also the frugality, interestingly, is willing to actually take corruption here and could have increased his population, but wants to have all of those 3 yellows. However, with not increasing his population and now having the frugality, he will actually have an additional population to work with. And an additional population might certainly be worth the 2 resources that he is now missing from corruption, especially with not having a clear plan on what he wants to invest those resources at the moment. So I think an interesting choice here, but that might be a very clever play here. Mata cedes and opens the historic territory, is able to win it with his very big colonization force, just for a warrior, so that's nice for him, but he's missing 1 food with the pact to regain this population this turn. Let's see if he will destroy something in order to rebuild the warrior. He's first of all going for Republic, takes the Kremlin, and is actually destroying this HA temple in order to rebuild the warrior, and then takes the cavalryman, interestingly, instead of building a step. Maybe has Hussars in hand, could be an indicator, or just wants to deny it. Let's see how many opponents are needing this copy of knights. I mean, Palino would probably be able to go for the phalanx tactic now, so maybe it's a bit of a denial, but also he might have Hussars and just might wants to be better prepared for H3 tactics. Palino upgrades his trade routes agreement and has now an international trade agreement with Plunderteig, and Palino still wants to have additional resources out of his pact. Plunderteig accepts the pact. He will upgrade 1 more journalism, which helps him to get out of corruption, takes the urban growth, the coal, and a strategy, which will also be very helpful for him to maybe get away with the bit of a greedy setup with those journalisms and missing out on the cannons, and now he is generating a bit of a culture lead, has some very strong science production. Eepogi seeds, the good harvest is revealed, giving Palino the most food. Eepogi will now, relatively late, go for his H1 leader, Columbus. Will be interesting to see whether he had actually drawn an H2 colony. He also goes for the Rifleman in order to make him a bit stronger, doesn't want to be the weakest any longer, instead is now even at 20 strength with having 2 phalanx tactics ongoing, having the necessary population thanks to the very early ocean liner. Plunderteig seeds and opens the knowledge of the ancients, which give everyone 3 value basically apart from Plunderteig. Plunderteig takes the railroad, increases his population, builds a knight, increases population again, is out of corruption, has now something to invest this resource into, but ironically he was willing to take corruption in order to grab the frugality, probably in order to get an additional pop out. Now, to get out of corruption, he's not using the frugality, and but thanks to the additional food from the pact, he might at some point again be able to use the frugality. Mata finishes the Kremlin, has now, even with missing out on the strategy, his 3rd military action, takes the selective breeding. General has now lots of civil actions, 9 civil actions. That's actually quite a lot, especially for that in H2, which we are still in. He then grabs an efficient upgrade, which he can use to efficiently upgrade his missing farms. Palino cancels actually the open borders agreement between him and Eepogi. Maybe the additional strength, even though he now loses a military action, might have made a difference between him being in danger of an aggression or not. So he cancelled the pact, goes for coal, goes for strategy, has really gotten a lot of resources out of Leonardo, so that pick I think worked out quite well. And then it goes for 1 coal upgrade, increases population 2 times, and then grabs the rich land. Eepogi uses Columbus, and he has gotten a culture boost, I think. Wait. Ooh, that's an interesting choice here. Eepogi goes for the autonomous territory, an extremely strong colony, so he got probably a bit of help of Lada here, but also waited for a while in order to achieve that with electing Columbus. But interestingly, he's taking culture as a one-time bonus, which at that part of the game is a bit of a questionable choice. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe it just felt like he's falling a bit behind in culture. There's at the moment not really the danger of Dark Ages, so I think some additional science could still potentially be more valuable, but of course if you're taking science, then it's only 4, and if you're taking culture, it's 7. Still a bit of an odd choice. Maybe taking food or resources would have brought him corruption. Yeah, but let's see how, if he just manages for the rest of the game with the science, then at the end it might work off for him. Or work out. Eepogi replaces Columbus immediately, goes for Catherine. I think getting that strong colony for free now really improved his position. Again, he takes the organized religion and the architecture. Also, he is quite threatening with being a 24 strength. There's another colony revealed, Martar being able to win it. Let's see if he will snatch that Suez Canal or if Plunderteig will take it away. But he is actually the railroad, so I think he can't take it away, so that might end up being a very strong Suez Canal for Martar, who now even got additional draws thanks to the territory in order to maybe find a colony if he hasn't found one yet. Plunderteig finishes the railroad, takes the selective breeding and the cannons. Martar cedes and opens the international agreement. Eepogi at his next turn has to decide whether he wants to use politics or not, and then take the additional cards. Martar upgrades one more farm, takes the Suez, finishes the Suez. Let's see what colony he has for the Suez Canal, and it is the historic territory. Maybe not the ideal one at this point, but still with the Gremlin, the happy faces could be very viable. Also makes it that he is a bit just stays in touch with Palino and Plunderteig and culture. So yeah, it's quite strong. He has now lots of civil actions, 10 production with the happy faces, will get a lot of free population. It looks like a strong position for Martar here. And he indeed has the Hussars tactic, so that cavalryman pick earlier probably was already a sign of that. Of course, we don't know that. Palino seats and the refugees are revealed, which, again, Eepogi benefits from his additional strength. Palino will lose a population. He will take the cavalryman, builds one, takes the urban growth, the reserves, gets some strong yellow cards, goes for an upgrade, builds an arena for free, is not copying the phalanx tactic. I think that might be a sign that maybe he hasn't drawn a strong H2 tactic yet and rather wants to get the additional draws now instead of maybe copying to that tactic and get some additional strength. But he's not the weakest even without copying it. And then it's Eepogi's turn. He will indeed use the international agreement, uses it to take the Republic and the Statue of Liberty. Can now develop the Republic, develops the architecture, develops the organized religion, upgrades the religion, upgrades another one, takes the revolutionary idea and the selective breeding. And yeah, I mean, now he actually doesn't have that much science left, so I think the 4 additional science could have been still viable or valuable for him, but let's see, maybe he will just manage very fine. Plunderteig seeds and the immigration is revealed, but no one has any unhappy workers. He will go for the selective breeding, goes for 2 upgrades, builds an additional lab using the urban growth before he loses it to the end of the age, goes for Darwin, which will maybe cause him a bit of issues, probably grabs the organized religion, otherwise it will be a bit annoying, but with the organized religion he can upgrade that temple and gets 2 additional happy faces because the one reduced one is already there with the HA religion. Also, we are now at the beginning of age 3, so now it's again time for my guess what I think which player will win the game. But first of all, we can maybe just take a quick look at each position. I think Martar, having a strong position, having lots of civil actions, will be interesting to see what H2 leader he goes for. Maria might be very strong, but she's available only for expensive, while Anthony Gaudi, for example, is available now. So that will be interesting. He's not the most culture production for now. Maybe he doesn't have the most military actions, also not the most science production. So I do think his 10 resource production and his population income are very strong for him. But he still has some parts of his civilization that he needs to fix. Maybe just going for Anthony Gaudi and building a journalism at his next turn could be very interesting. Palino has gone for maybe a bit of greedy lines early on, has produced quite a bit of culture, but is actually not that much in front. Plunderteig has even more culture scored at this point, with maybe the help of Nostradamus and also, of course, just some culture production. So he is not really that much ahead in culture, still has managed to build a very solid economy, has the Himeji Castle to defend himself, but he's missing a government form still, which might be a bit limiting. Then it's Eepogi. We have Eepogi civilization. Also lots of civil actions, I think even one more now compared to Martar Pêcheur, but not as strong resource production. Science production is similar. He has the ocean liner, has lots of free population and will even get the statue, so that's definitely the the strongest part about his civilization, and I think he maybe could have some military potential with all the free pop and already being in the strength lead for now. So let's see if he can do something with that. And Plunderteig having the culture lead for now, having a bit of happy face issues, but also having a way to fix those, having lots of science saved up compared to his opponents. Definitely having a big science lead in that regard. But also together with Palino having the lowest civil action count, at least having Darwin to make up a bit for that. And also maybe will be interesting to see how he can fix his military. But I think every player has managed to build up something strong, so there's no civilization that looks very weak or stands out as clearly the weakest one. So now I have to do a guess again, and like the last time in this group, I actually have no clue who I should bet on. Actually, maybe I would actually again pick Motar as the winner, because this resource production I think could carry him. He has not the most culture production, but he can go for Anthony Gaudi plus journalism, for example. Has good population income, some problems maybe with his military actions, but he got already some additional draws from the Colossus. So I think I again say Motar wins this game, which would mean that he has a really strong start into the semifinals. Then Then I would say Eepogi with his many population will finish second and his many civil actions. And then I would say there is Pierre in the game. Because of Pierre being the game, I say Palino finishes at the third and Plunderteig at the last position, but Plunderteig could easily win from this position, so it's just a bit of vibes, but basically having no clue. But I pick Marta as the winner, Eepogi second, Palino third, Plunderteig fourth. Let's see if I will be somewhat correct or completely wrong. Now it's Marta's turn. He will seed, opens the developed territory, is able to win another colony. So that maybe is increasing my hopes of him actually winning the game at the end. He wins this colony for knight, is now at 11 resource production, takes the cannons, develops them. That of course looks like he might have mobile artillery or mechanized army drawn. He builds 2 cannons, takes Anthony Gaudi, elects him, doesn't take journalists, maybe he's hoping for either opera or some early multimedia. And he has indeed a mechanized army. With that he will be very nicely able to defend himself and might even be in a position to get aggressive himself. Palino seeds, the Ravages of Time are revealed. That could be very bad for Plunderteig. So actually the things that are happening right after I do the guess are, I think they are increasing my chances that the guess might be successful, because Plunderteig losing the St. Peter's Basilica to the Ravages of Time might definitely be very annoying for him, especially with having Darwin and some unhappy face issues already. Palino this turn will go for Maria Theresa, will increase his population, destroys a mine actually, builds a cavalryman, and has the classic army tactic. Who knows, maybe he drew this tactic thanks to not copying the phalanx tactic earlier, or he didn't copy the phalanx tactic because he has already had the classic army tactic drawn. Eepogi this turn will steal some yellow tokens from Marta Pêcheur and Plunderteig. He will fix his famine issues this turn, going for 1 upgrade, increases his population. Interestingly takes the multimedia. With the amount of resource that he is available, that could be a bit of a greedy, especially with Marta having a strong tactic already, even though of course for a moment he's lacking military actions. But maybe also doesn't want to give that copy to any of his opponents, and it could still be very valuable. There's Fleming in the game and Einstein, and he might get some additional resources now with all of those yellows. But he still has the statue, so those are some heavy resource investments that he's planning. Plunderteig takes the team sports. That is not looking great. Not a good side for him here. But yeah, with the team sports, he is first of all preparing for Pierre and gets more efficient happy faces for Darwin. He will go for team sports, builds one, takes the tanks, develops the tanks, goes for an upgrade, is actually willing to disband the warriors, now quite weak, could get punished by aggressions potentially, or maybe events, but copies to the Hussars tactic. With that is maybe still at a fine amount of strength, but misses out completely on his first H3 draws. Now it's Martapesher's turn. He will offer a scientific cooperation pact to Plunderteig, I think, with having a lot of civil actions and there being some interesting techs in the row that could, and also having Anthony Gaudi, he definitely has the potential to save some science, but of course Plunderteig as well could save easily some science here, so it might just end up being a very strong pact for both of them. Marta developing the cavalryman can now develop them for quite cheaply. Upgrades one is now 26 strength, builds a religion to get 2 additional culture production with Anthony Gaudi and to reduce the science prices of the opera and potential future urban text he wants to go for by even 1 more. And then even builds an additional cannon to make him the strongest for now. Now it's Palino's turn. He seeds and opens the freedom of movement. He will use it to put... Where is it? A religion into cavalryman with already having those bread and circuses. He actually goes for the fundamentalism. Maybe wants to try something aggressive or just wants to protect himself. Goes for another arena. Probably maybe also wants to get the action quickly, but now he's relatively low in science. Takes the Rev Ideal though to maybe have some help with that, and is just now relatively threatening and also relatively safe with also having Himeji on top. Eepogi plays a blunder against Plunderteig. It's a bit different carrying through with the German pronunciation of that word. If you have cards like plunder in the game, you might have noticed it before already. But Plunderteig can defend against this plunder, and then Eepogi will play the Wave of Nationalism for 4 additional resources, builds a knight, adopts the classic army tactic, with that he is following Palino in the strength push, plays actually reserves for food to not have famine, develops the multimedia, builds one, the statue gets quite delayed, but he gets the engineering genius now, and also the military theory, but the engineering genius of course makes it a bit easier for him to finish the statue, and I mean the yellow tokens might be important soon, otherwise he might be just empty his yellow bank soon, but also might still need to find some use cases for this population at the moment. Now it's Plunderteig's turn. He upgrades knight to tanks, is now 26 strength. And I guess he has some issues. I think he might indeed be in danger of potentially finishing last. His culture lead is dwindling. Gets to spaceflight now at least, but yeah, he has some issues militarily. Not the most resources saved up, not the most actions, so that could end up being problematic for him. Martin seeds and opens the wealthy territory. He's able to win it. Has now an extremely strong Suez cannon going on. Sends the cannon away. Maybe he built that one in order to be able to win another colony. Has now 6 colonies and is producing 12 additional resources per turn. This turn he will increase his population. Let's see if he goes for operas or maybe even upgrades this opera to movie. First of all, he actually goes for another cannon, also used the freedom of movement to put the iron into cannon, which I guess is fine with that big production. Eepogi put an agriculture into knight, and Plunderteig moved the religion into team sports, which I guess makes a lot of sense with Darwin. Marta takes the democracy this turn and is willing to develop it, goes up to 11 culture reduction, takes the computers interestingly, maybe wants to be set up for Steve Jobs or Einstein. Both of them could be interesting leader to also late in the game, and then he goes for second armies now at 45 strength and the strongest. Palino is going for another aggression, or this time he's going for an aggression against Plunderteig. Again, another plunder against Plunderteig. And he is stealing 5 resources and 2 food from him. He plays some his reserves for food. I guess he could have taken just more food from the plunder, but maybe then would have ended up playing it for resources. I don't know. A little bit odd at the first look that he just didn't take more food, but maybe also wanted to hurt Plunderteig potentially. Oh, and there's Pierre on the row. I think he just has to grab an, and he immediately does. That's just too strong with having 3 bread and circuses. And I mean, I said there's Pierre in the game, which is why at the end put him at 3rd over Plunderteig, but who knows, maybe Pierre will now carry Palino to an even better finish. And he is even building a 4th arena thanks to the big urban building limit with having fundamentalism, destroys his farm and builds an additional swordsman. So, yeah. maybe just didn't have a lot else to do with this last civil action and then just played it for food instead of taking more food from Plunderteig. Also becoming the strongest again. Eepogi is again trying an aggression, a spy against Plunderteig, but this time it fails again for him. So fortunate for him that his aggressions failed, but I guess he also was weaker than Palino, so that is of course reducing the chances of a successful aggression. He will finish the Statue of Liberty this turn. And yeah, he's still a bit low in resources at the moment. I don't really see if his additional population will carry him that much that I at this point maybe would favor Palino's position again, but Pierre's just so insanely strong. Plunderteig goes now for the cannons, can develop them with the Scientific Cooperation Pact. Actually goes for the oil, that will boost his resource production soon by a lot, but he's actually missing resources to go for the upgrade this turn. Interestingly, he's still developing it this turn. So, interesting choice here. Could have also grabbed another patriotism, which might be important for him to be able to defend himself. So, very interesting that he actually develops the oil, does that commitment. Seems a bit weird at first. Maybe he was afraid that the Scientific Cooperation Pact could get cancelled, which I guess is a legitimate thing to be afraid about. So Marta would still maybe like to get into those computers for very cheap. And then he builds a cannon and can soon make the transition into the mechanized army, but for now is still quite a bit in danger. And he indeed will get hit by an aggression, the armed intervention. Martin steals some culture from him, will go for the computers, which he can still do thanks to the Scientific Cooperation Pact, goes for some upgrades, is now 10 science production, takes the engineering, the patriotism, increases his population, actually builds an additional farm. That kinda smells like impact of agriculture or balance to me, and Marta actually being the only player who has seeded some impact so far, so I wouldn't be surprised to see impact of agriculture or balance there, but maybe he just did it to, maybe it's a gamble, or not a gamble, but a guess that those impacts could get seeded and to still get maybe some additional food. Could also be an indicator that an economic progress is coming. There's actually the red cross. And Plunderteig, now this game isn't going great for him. I think my guess for the last place is now quite a bit realistic. Palino will hit him with a war. Destroys the lab. Is he destroying more now? He is actually not developing the satellites, which he could have done. Maybe instead wants to save up the science for air forces. Has maybe a second war in hand. Maybe doesn't want to make that war too big in order to reduce the chances that Plunderteig might resign. Plunderteig didn't grab the patriotism for one, so not sure how much of a difference. I mean, I guess he could have built just an additional cannon, so he could have gotten additional tactic here. It seems a bit of an odd decision for me. Maybe he already played to his outs, but still, just being able to go for an additional cannon, I think, would have been extremely valuable here. Eepogi opens the National Pride, which will give Palino the most, who has the most culture, so he will get the 5 additional culture. Eepogi will go for Einstein this turn, develops the military theory to get a bit stronger, builds another multimedia, takes the military build up, the tanks, increases his population, and plays the revolutionary idea in order to already develop a second tech with Einstein this turn. Plunderteig won't resign, maybe still sees some outs for him, and reveals the civil unrest. He will take the military theory, develops it, goes for Marlene, I guess. With Marlene, he of course can still go for 2 mechanized army tactics. Still taking the patriotism, I think, could have been very viable. The oil probably won't do really anything still for him. He copies the mechanized army tactic. With that, has actually more strength than Palino. So yeah, I guess with being able, Palino can of course still sacrifice, has actually 5 cavalrymen, so is able to sacrifice and still maybe go for 2 air forces if he wants to. So might still win the war, but only by a bit, so I guess there is some hope for Plunderteig that he won't get hit by another war, but I think it could still very likely happen. Then it's Marta's turn. He opens the vast territory. This time he's not willing to bid. And Plunderteig actually, but I guess just for this warrior. Then Marta goes for the civil service, increases his population, builds an additional lab, interestingly. which I guess guarantees him the Air Forces, so that is the reason behind that. The Scientific Operation Pact will get cancelled before Plunderteig's turn, and now he's exactly the 12 signs that he needs in order to threaten some Air Forces and not be in danger of a war. Actually 2 copies of Air Forces left in the deck. If those are not both in the last position, then Palino will get one at his turn, and I would not be surprised to see a second war from him. With him not maximizing the amount of strength that he can go for. There are actually some Air Forces coming down the road, both of them. He sacrificed a cavalryman as expected, will steal some culture, and there is indeed a second war. Palino goes for the Air Forces, develops them, destroys a mine, destroys another mine, is now at 77 strength, will still get the Olympic Games at the next turn, and at this point, maybe indeed he could even win the game. And he then takes the efficient upgrade reserves he already had in hand. But of course he might get punished quite a bit by the impacts. So let's see how that will go. Eepogi Seeds opens the inhabited territory, Eepogi being the only one willing to bid for that, wins it for Knight, has the military build-up to rebuild his military efficiently, gets the last copy of Air Force, develops it, plays the military build-up, builds an Air Force, builds the Knight, is back at 54 strength. Might be in danger of an aggression, but at the next turn Palino wants to declare the Olympic Games, so the danger of an aggression is maybe not as big. He then takes the movies, plays the reserves, so the next turn can maybe build a movie to just prepare nicely for impacts and maximize his culture production even more. Now it's Plunderteig's turn, and he can actually go for successful aggression, a raid. Let's see if that will mix things up a bit. Interestingly, he actually goes for an upgrade here, but Marta, I think, would have needed 2 cards to defend, so yeah, he didn't have those 2 cards, and that is of course quite painful for him here, now losing those buildings, especially if maybe one of those impacts is the impact of balance, which now got hurt quite a bit, and if he has an impact that he wants to seed, now there's the danger of that impact being revealed. Plunderteig upgrades a mine, so doesn't want to invest all of his resources. He could have, with 17 resources, built 2 more cannons and a tank, but then couldn't have finished the space flight. And in a sense of maximizing the amount of culture, it sometimes can be better to not maximize the strength and rather make sure to finish the wonder. Still interesting, but the additional units wouldn't made it possible for him to win this game. Maybe he also has knowledge about impact of industry, in which case this oil upgrade would be even stronger and also would maybe explain why he was willing to commit to that already. He then takes computer sufficient upgrade and is at least at 60 strength. Could have had 16 more, still would have lost the war. I mean, at this point he probably doesn't have the biggest hopes left. Marta doesn't seed, builds a religion, builds bread and circuses, develops the engineering. Interestingly, after building that, but maybe it doesn't matter. There's actually the red cross still, something that I didn't pay attention to on the row. He then upgrades his lab, plays the reserves, builds his 4 stages, and with that gets still a bunch of culture going. Palino will first of all sacrifice a unit again, steals a lot of culture from Plunderteig, seeds, plays the Olympic Games, the impact of harmony is revealed. I think that one was also damaged by the raid, and it's quite bad for Palino, so he has stolen a lot of culture, but he might still get punished quite a bit by those impacts. Maybe now at least can fix some of those by a little bit during his last turn. He will disband probably a bunch of stuff. Harmony is now already out, so he knows that he doesn't necessarily have to prepare for that one. Instead, goes for upgrading printing press to journalism. Something like impact of balance would be quite painful for him. Also builds this last step of the red cross, and there are a lot of colonies in the game, so that finishing the wonder still also gave Marta quite a bit of culture. Eepogi seeds. And there's indeed the impact of balance, so my guess early on was correct. Building that additional farm was already a bit of a hint towards the impact of balance, and also, who knows, maybe that raid actually prevented Marta Pressure from seeding impact. He had knowledge about both of them got fixed. If his impact that he had was not a very good one, then he maybe now had to miss out on seeding that, so the raid potentially having even more drawbacks here for Marta. But the impact of balance still being impacted brings Marta a bit closer to Palino again, but still quite a bit of a gap to overcome. bit. I guess Eepogi probably wouldn't have upgraded his impact of balance by that much. There's also interestingly still an H2 event on top, seeded by Eepogi. So let's see if that one will still get revealed by Plunderteig. Eepogi now building a movie, building an Air Force, maybe hinting to impact of strength. That one would not be great for Martar, or not be good news for him. Now it's Plunderteig's turn. He doesn't seed, plays the endowment, develops the computers, finishes the space flight, so 26 points. I guess it might have been worth it for him to not commit everything into military here, because the difference on what he could have gotten in addition with the 2 cannons might have been worth it against Palino, but Palino probably being the best position anyway. Probably Plunderteig will lose anyway, but still, if it would have been closer, if he would be closer towards Martar and Eepogi, I think the line that he played would be the right one. Still, of course, a bit unfortunate for Martar and Eepogi that Palino got a bigger war off. And that's all his turn before the final impacts. Palino is in the lead, has some weaknesses and impacts, but some of the impacts that are weak for him are already out. And then, Martar has quite a bit of a lead towards Eepogi. So at the moment, it doesn't look like as an exciting finish as in the game, as the first game of this group. But let's see if maybe there could still be some changes. Let's also quickly take a look at which player seeded how many impacts. Yellow is seeded 2, so Eepogi 2, and all of the other players have 1 impact in there. And the first impact being impact of competition, that might of course be one that is actually quite fine for Palino, who went for strength push. Maybe that's also the impact that got seeded by him. Still, Eepogi and Plunderteig actually are a bit better than Palino in this impact. There is indeed the impact of strength. So far the impacts have brought Eepogi quite a bit closer to Martar, and Palino has now as big of a lead that I think catching up to him with 3 impacts will be quite difficult. Then we have the impact of culture, and I think now it's clear Palino will win that game. Eepogi overtaking Martar here, being in the 2nd position. We have the impact of progress, also seems to be a solid one for Eepogi, but an even better one for Martar. He is now again 3 points in the lead before Eepogi. There's 1 impact left, so there is still one very interesting thing to be decided. And the last impact is the impact of happiness. That gives only plus 12 for Martar, but also not Eepogi doesn't get the full value. If he would have gotten the full value out of this impact, he would have finished 1 culture before Martar, but he's missing 1 happy face in order to overtake him and finish at the 2nd position. So that actually still got extremely close here. Eepogi managing nicely to get closer to Martar for sure on the final impacts, but it's just not enough for him to overtake him. Palino at the end being able to win. He was just in a position to go for some wars, went for the fundamentalism early, that gave him some strength potential. I think he also then drew probably 3 cards every turn, and with that he got those wars going, and also had of course Pierre, and those things at the end carried him to the win. Martar having a very solid position, he was the one that I guessed as the winner. But he at the end finishes the 2nd position, could have even finished at the 3rd one. That raid maybe was a bit annoying for him, and he just didn't manage to get enough culture out of the strong economical position that he had. Eepogi had lots of population, also did nicely, I think. The multimedia at the end worked off nicely. He had Einstein, he scored him a lot of points, but at the end just not being enough to overtake Martar. And Plunderteig, he had some issues with losing St. Peter's Basilica. He just had to react to that, and then his culture lead was not big enough to make up for the problems that he had and for the inferior economy. Alright, and with that we are at the end of the game. Congratulations for Palino for winning this one. Martar was finishing 2nd, should now be in the lead after the 2 4-player games, with it being at 9 points. Palino should be at 7 points. Eepogi at 1 and Plunderteig at 3. So Palino and Martar Pescher pulling a little bit ahead in the group, but still 6 games to play for everyone, and so still a lot can happen. Alright, then I hope it was an interesting game for you to watch. Let me know in the comments what you think of it. Also, of course, if one of the participating players wants to share some thoughts, they are welcome too. And yeah, then thanks for watching, have a nice time, and see you in the next video when I will then probably be on holidays.